So hello and welcome to this NPTEL course entitled 20th Century Fiction, where we're looking at Sardar Hasan Manto's short story Toba Tek Singh, which I'm hoping to conclude in this lecture today. So we've seen how this short story covers many aspects, the chief among which is the trauma and the entire the disturbance and unsettling of partition, which takes away all human agency, and how we've seen the madhouse in Lahore, which is the setting in the story, how that becomes paradoxically the only possible site of agency, the only possible site of resistance, which is obviously, inverting the entire rational mad binary. So we find that the madmen over here, they end up acting more rationally, they end up asking more rational questions compared to the bigger spectacle of madness, which is partition in the first place. So the point at which we stopped in the last lecture is the point where someone called Fazal Din, who's a Muslim who comes from Toba Tek Singh, and he comes to visit Bishan Singh, who's a protagonist in the story. And we find that how that little episode, little conversation, little exchange they have, Fazal Din and Bishan Singh, it is full of human empathy, it's full of very, very intimate conversations about little things like a buffalo giving birth to two calves, one of which has died, etc. So very local, very intimate knowledge, which is sort of delivered to Bishan Singh. And we find that how this intimacy of knowledge is completely consumed, or completely obliterated, and completely taken over by the bigger knowledge narratives at the moment, which is about India and Pakistan, which is about the formation of the states of India and Pakistan. So among other things, as I mentioned in my last lecture, I may have mentioned that what partition did was it brought about an entire violence, an entire idea of violence, an order of violence at the level of the epistemic knowledge, epistemic narrative. So your awareness of reality, your knowledge of reality, your navigation of reality, that gets truncated, that gets interrupted, that gets terribly unsettled by the violence of partition. So your knowledge of your address, of your birthplace, of your location, of your experience around you, all that goes very, very unsettled with the partition coming in. So the partition was obviously a massive spectacle of physical violence, but also, and equally, it was a big violence on the mental health of people. It brought out trauma. Obviously, the trauma lingered on for generations. And that's something which Toba Tek Singh also points at. Now we find that, despite the intimacy in the conversation that Fazal Din has with Bishan Singh, there's one little episode in that conversation where things get a bit cryptic, and there's a sinister quality about that a little bit as well. When he's reporting to Bishan Singh that all your family members are fine, your brother is fine, your wife is fine, and when he comes to his daughter, he says, well, she too, and there's a moment of hesitation, and she says she too is safe in India. The hesitation obviously holds the key to an ambivalence away. It could mean many things. It could mean that she may have been murdered, or taken away, or something terrible that happened to her sexually. Maybe she became a victim of abuse. We don't quite know, but that hesitation is pointed towards all kinds of possibilities, which are never spelled out in this short story. So again, this is a very classical trope of all great short stories. The things are never really spelled out. Things are suggested, hinted, insinuated. And we as readers need to unpack the insinuations. We as readers need to unpack the hints and suggestions, the entire economy of suggestions which are there in the short story. And then, of course, this little episode about the brown buffaloes giving birth to calves, one of them dying, etc. I just come back to this point, and this should be on a screen, where he's telling Bishan Singh, say, I think of them often. So when I meet your family, you should convey my best wishes to them. Say I think of them often, and to write to me if there's anything I can do. So, again, we can see how these human beings are separated by this completely brainless or mindless activity of partition. They suddenly decided to demarcate people on the basis of religion, and as a result of which people who have been neighbors for years, for generations, suddenly find themselves across each other in two different parts of the world, two different nations. And suddenly a border has been created between the houses. Suddenly a boundary has been created between the houses, and obviously these borders and boundaries are not just physical sites, they also become mental situations where there's always this border you have to cross to talk to someone, to trust someone. So among other things, what partition did historically was it was a violence, not just in the human body, not just in the corporeal human self, but also the mental human self. It was a violence on trust. It was a violence on relationships. So everything became suspicious after the partition. People started mistrusting their neighbors, etc. So again, the question of trust becomes very important. The question of empathy becomes very important here. So, and this conversation continues, and I come back, and this should be on the screen. Then he added, here, I've brought some plums for you. So he's bringing some fruits, again, as a token of intimacy, as a token of human kindness and care and concern, that he's sort of come all the way to meet Bishan Singh from Toba Tek Singh, and he's delivering him the news about his family. It's delivering him local news about buffaloes giving birth to calves, and then, of course, at the end, he gives them two very simple but very, very humanly loaded and rich gifts. Bishan Singh took the gift from Fazal Din and handed it to the god. Where is Toba Tek Singh, he asked. And that's the key question. So again, look at the way in which the intimate narratives about buffaloes, about family members, all these little things in the villages, those get subsumed completely under this big grand question, the meta question. Where is Toba Tek Singh? Is Toba Tek Singh in India or in Pakistan? That's a big thing, that's a big question, that's a big narrative of knowledge that everyone's wanting to know. Where is my location now? Where is my address now? In which country does it belong to? So again, coming back to the point I've already spoken about, is that how intimacy goes away, how trust goes away, how little narratives, local narratives go away completely. What we have instead is a big grand narrative about the nation formation. That becomes the only narrative, that becomes the only narrative that people are interested in. So where is Toba Tek Singh? Where? Why? It is where it has always been. So again, look at the dramatic irony of it. They don't seem to understand each other immediately, because when Fazal Din is asked where is Toba Tek Singh, he thinks of it as a physical location. He says, well, it does not change. It is where it has always been. It is the same place. In India or in Pakistan? In India, oh no, in Pakistan. So again, the ambivalence here is interesting. The confusion over here is interesting. He first says in India, and then he says it's Pakistan. So the confusion in the response, the confused response over here holds the key to the existential dilemma in these people's minds. So they don't quite know what the place of birth is. It's just some random decision taken for them and some random ritual with which the whole mapping has happened. So he first says India and then he says Pakistan, seemingly unsure. So again, he's trying to comfort Bishan Singh to a certain extent, just like he had tried to comfort him with the news of his daughter. He didn't want to tell him perhaps the gruesome bad thing which had probably happened to her. We don't quite know, but he had hesitated for a moment before telling him that she too is safe in India. Likewise, when he's asked a question about Toba Tek Singh, he first says, oh, it's in India, and then he says, oh, maybe it's in Pakistan. So again, the confusion over here is cognitive, it's political, it's existential, it's emotional, and all that comes together, all that coalesces together into forming this big, massive confusion about your identity, about your location, about your existential situation as a human subject. Okay. Without saying another word, Bishan Singh walked away, murmuring again the seemingly nonsensical thing that he says, Upate Gurgur the annex Baya Dhyanak Munkidal of Pakistan or India dur 50 mon. So again, the crux of this nonsense lyric is, well, we don't quite know what's in India, what's in Pakistan, and the gods up above do not care, just like they never cared about the quality of dal deteriorating. So again, the deteriorating dal becomes a very symbolic thing, a very symbolic object over here, because that is that's reflective of the greater deterioration, the greater rot that is happening all around. Rot at the level of human knowledge, rot at the level of political knowledge, rot at the level of human location, about human conditions, etc. So the Munki Dal, which is deteriorating in Toba Tek Singh, is again, it's a bit like, if you read Eugene Ionesco's play Rhinoceros, or any of the plays by Ionesco, there's always a deteriorating, a rotting thing. It is a dead body which is rotting and growing nails, where there's rhinoceros which are bellowing away, and a very rotten metropolis. So there's this similar absurd quality. I mean, Ionesco obviously belongs to the school of absurd theatre. There's a similar absurd quality about Toba Tek Singh, but like Ionesco's play, the absurdity of this particular story is what makes it so profoundly political and quality. So the absurdity is not an irrational absurdity. It's not escape from rationality. Rather, it's a reflection of rationality, or rather, it's a reflection of the rot of rationality, that what we consider and consume to be rational has actually become so rotten to the core that the consumption of rationality itself has become pathological in quality. So rationality is rotting away, and so absurdity seems to be the only way in which we can engage with rational questions, because rationality, the way it is operative now, is a rotting mechanism, is at its core a very, very rotting structure. So absurdity over here becomes not an escape from rationality, but a deeper engagement with rationality. And that's the ironical message in Toba Tek Singh. And when you have a moment like partition, when you have a traumatic moment, a traumatic experience, an event like partition, then absurdity paradoxically becomes the only possible engagement with rationality, because rationality itself becomes so rotten to the core. So, and then we cut back into the present time, where the big day of exchange has been decided, has been settled, and the lunatics have been transported to the bazaar, to the border in a van. And again, there's something very, very absurd about the whole setting. All the lunatics are dressed up in uniforms, presumably, and two vans are going to come from across India and Pakistan, and they're going to meet across the border, and they'll release the lunatics in a chain, presumably. So it's quite spectacular, and there's also a darkly comic quality about it, which is also making it very, very political in quality, because what has been done over here essentially is that two sets of madmen, quote-unquote madmen across the borders, would be swapped across each other, because that seems to be the politically correct thing to do, right, under the given circumstances, where a partition has wrought the such destruction in so many people's lives. In order to make it mathematically complete, in order to give a closure to this whole politics of division, even the madmen will be swapped across the borders, just like the lunatics had been, we were told at the beginning of the story. So we now know, this is again part of the text which should be on the screen. At long last, the arrangements for the exchange were complete. The lists of lunatics who were to be sent over from the other side were exchanged, and the date fixed. So each party, each country sent a list of lunatics to the other country, and they would just tally and match the lists in terms of getting the lunatics from the other side. Again, there's something very bizarrely bureaucratic about the whole movement, which makes it very, very absurd. So again, it's coming back to the same thing. Absurdity becomes a deeper engagement with rationality, whereas rational bureaucracy becomes a true absurdity in this situation. Okay. So on a cold winter evening, truckloads of Hindu and Sikh lunatics from the Lahore asylum were moved out into the Indian border under police escort. So again, there's it's very cinematic if you think about it. Truckloads of, Hindu and Sikh lunatics were being transported from the asylum, from the Lahore asylum, and they're taken towards the border, the Wagah border presumably, where India and Pakistan states to exchange their madmen. Senior officials went with them to ensure a smooth exchange. So again, the bureaucrats are going to ensure that there's a smooth exchange, that all the boxes are ticked, the tallies kept, the names of madmen are matched against each other's lists, etc. The two sides met at the Wagah border checkpost, signed documents, and the transfer got underway. Now, if we take a look at the sentence over here, the two sides met, signed documents, and the transfer got underway. There's something automatic, there's something perversely automatic and perversely non-human about this movement over here. So it's almost as if two switches are switched on and the swapping mechanism begins to happen. It's like a vending machine. You press a switch, a function happens. So trucks go to the border, documents are signed, and the prisoners are released, and they began swapping each other. So you find that the stillness, the clinical quality about this whole exchange is what makes it so perverse in quality. Now, against this perverse stillness, against this perverse automatic quality of exchange, what we have is an act of resistance by madmen. So the lunatic movements, the lunatic limb movements, motor movements, emotional swings, the mood swings of the madmen, they become the only available human resistance against this clinical bureaucratic exchange. So we find, and there's a description given right away, where the madmen's movements of resistance are described to us, and obviously it's very, very tragic, very, very sad, and also it seems funny in a very superfluous kind of a way. They began to run away, they began to remonstrate, they began to protest. They don't want to go across the borders because no one obviously had consulted them, no one obviously had taken their consent in terms of agreeing to transport them, but then they carry on and they are forced to do it. It's a spectacle of coercion in that sense. So all these madmen are coerced into crossing the borders according to their names and religious affiliations. So the Hindus will come to India, the Muslims will go to Pakistan. So again, it's a very mathematical, perversely rational kind of a swapping, and that again obviously corroborates the point. The rationality becomes diseased over here. Rationality becomes a true absurd phenomenon over here. And we are told that the resistance of the madman becomes quite palpable and quite spectacular in quality. Get the lunatics out of the trucks and handing them over to the opposite side proved to be a tough job. Some refused to get down from the trucks. Those who could be persuaded to do so began to run in all directions. So again, the running away in different directions becomes a complete contrast to the linear, sequential and automatic quality of the transfer movements that were done by the bureaucrats. So again, the disarray of the madman becomes, in a way, an act of resistance against this perverse sense of order, a perverse imposition of order that has been done or been executed with a neat exchange according to religious affiliations. Right? So the madman running away, the madman becoming hysterical, quote unquote, all these become almost political in quality in a form of a resistance given against this grand narrative of exchange. So some refused to get down from the trucks. Those who could be persuaded to do so began to run in all directions. Some were stark naked. So again, the nakedness becomes an act of subversion. You're taking off the clothes, you're running in all directions, and that is obviously undercutting the very clean clinical maneuver which has been done by the bureaucrats over here. Dress them out in a particular way, chain them up in a particular way, and then swap them across the borders and take the boxes, tally the names against the people coming in. Very, very bureaucratic, very cold, very clinical, very automatic in quality. So the heartlessness of it is something which is very, very palpable. The human, the non-human, inhuman quality of the whole thing becomes very, very palpable over here. So some were stark naked. As soon as they were dressed, they tore off their clothes again. So again, the tearing of the clothes becomes, in a way, an act of subversion, an act of rebellion. They swore, they sang, and they fought with each other. So again, we find this is completely undercutting or attempting to undercut the neat clinical closure that the two governments wanted to have now. And the fact that the madmen are swearing, running against each other, they're singing together, they're exhibiting all kinds of quote-unquote hysterical reactions. And the hysteria over here paradoxically becomes the only available agency that they can enact under the circumstances. Others wept. Female lunatics who were also being exchanged were even noisier. It was pure bedlam, the teeth chattering and bitter cold. So bedlam obviously becomes, it's nice. It's an archetype. It's the original madhouse, and it goes back to classical times. Bedlam, it's medieval, it's classical. So this Lahore Asylum madhouse is connected to an archetype of madness, which is bedlam, which has become synonymous with confusion, synonymous with turmoil, a complete topsy-turvy, etc. But originally it was a big madhouse in classical times and also in medieval times, bedlam. So it was pure bedlam. So this word becomes interesting in terms of a dialogue with the local and the mythical. So most of the inmates appeared to be dead set against the entire operation. So this is where the agency-lessness of the madman comes into play. They do not want to be moved. They do not want to be swapped. They are absolutely against it. They're dead set against the entire operation. The word operation obviously gives it a clinical, cold, detached, bureaucratic quality, which is not human. So the human consent is not taken. The human will is against this operation, but this operation has to be executed because that's what the governments have decided. Very Kafkaesque centers have decided this exchange, so the human beings have to abide or conform to it. Otherwise, there would be dissidents, and obviously madmen would be dealt with differently. They simply could not understand why they were being forcibly removed to a strange place. So the strangeness becomes important, and obviously strangeness over here bears some resemblance to the Freudian understanding of the uncanny, right? Uncanny being strange, uncanny also being unhomely outside the home. So they were actually being made to leave their home in some sense. So Lahore being their home, the asylum was their home for the longest time. So they were now asked to leave their home and to enter the uncanny. So India, to these people, despite their Hindu affiliation, despite the Sikh affiliation, India is a strange country. India, in the sense that it has been newly formed, the new state of India is a strange country to them. And they don't want to go there because they were born in Lahore, they're born in different parts of what is Pakistan, and they want to be there because that's where they grew up and that's the identity they have, the spatial extension of the identity. Now, that spatial extension is being amputated away or terminated, and now they've been so pushed into a different kind of spatial identity, which is imposed upon them without their consent whatsoever. So we are told that they simply could not understand. It's cognitive confusion to them as well. Why is this happening? Where are we going? What are the political implications of this movement? So these are questions to which no one can give any answer to them. So they're completely confused, cognitively confused, politically confused, etc. They simply could not understand why they were being forcibly removed to a strange place. Slogans to Pakistan Zindabad and Pakistan Murdabad were raised. So again, long live Pakistan and death to Pakistan, both were raised together, almost simultaneously by different people. And only timely intervention prevented serious clashes, right? So intervention by the police, intervention by the military, by the observing officials, that was the only way that any clashes could be stopped. Otherwise, people would just come into blows almost regularly. And also this whole idea of Pakistan Zindabad, Pakistan Murdabad, long live Pakistan, death to Pakistan, they're all being clamored almost together. And that obviously goes to show that, you know, all these affiliations is very random in quality. So to what is to one person a death wish can also be a life wish to some other person. The same event, the same space can have a life wish and a death wish by two different people, depending on which perspective you're choosing to take. When Bishan Singh's turn came to give his personal details to be recorded to the register, he asked the official, where is Toba Tek Singh, in India or in Pakistan? So again, the only detail which matters to him, and this is a complete discrepancy in details, because the officials, the more interesting detail is whether he is Hindu or Sikh or Muslim, according to which the movement will be done, the movement will be determined depending on his religious affiliation. But to him, the only question is, where is Toba Tek Singh? So he doesn't really care about his Sikh affiliation over here. He doesn't really care about his anti-Muslim affiliation over here. All he wants to know, all he needs to know at this point is, where is Toba Tek Singh, in India or in Pakistan? The officer laughed loudly. In Pakistan, of course. So this was meant to be a joke, perhaps. In Pakistan, of course. But what that does to Bishan Singh is that it gives him the impression that he's being made to force to leave Pakistan and go to a strange country, which is India, right? So he's concerned about Toba Tek Singh, the village from which he's from, and it doesn't really matter to him whether it's in India or Pakistan. He just needs to know where it is. Now, someone half jokingly tells him that it's in Pakistan, which gives an impression that he's about to be sent off from his own land. And obviously that is a very dramatic moment for him. That is a moment of epiphany for him. That, you know, I'm about to lose my home, I'm about to lose my place of birth. Hearing that, Bishan Singh turned and ran back to join his companions. So he just refused to go because he was told he's in Pakistan, and he realized that he's about to leave Pakistan. In a sense, he'll be about to leave his home. So he'll never go back to his home. That's what is playing in his mind. So he runs back, he turns back and ran back to his companions. The Pakistani guards caught hold of him and tried to push him across the line to India. Bishan Singh would not move. This is Toba Tek Singh, he announced. Upade Gurgu, the annex to be the Hana Munk Toba Tek Singh and Pakistan. So again, the nonsense lyric about, the nonsense line about the quality of Dal deteriorating and how Pakistan and Toba Tek Singh are the same thing, that is being uttered by him, right? And obviously he refuses to go because he's told that this is in Pakistan, and you know, this is being Pakistan. He realizes, why would he go to India if going to India means losing Toba Tek Singh? So again, look at the way in which the spatial identity has prerogative in his mind over his religious identity. He could not really care so much about his religious identity, but what he does care about is the spatial identity, how the space becomes an extension of the self. And that extension quality is important for us to understand. Okay, it was explained to him over and over again that Toba Tek Singh was in India, or very soon would be, but all his persuasion had no effect. So again, people are trying to just get rid of him. So they're telling him that Toba Tek Singh is in India, or if it's not in India now, it will be in India at some point in time, but that had no effect. Now, the point here is to understand that what are the two spatial parameters at play over here. So to Bishan Singh, the only spatial parameter which is meaningful is Toba Tek Singh. To his officials, the two other grand meaningful parameters will be India or Pakistan. So Toba Tek Singh will be completely insignificant in their radar, in the cognitive radar. It doesn't really matter, it doesn't really feature in the cognitive radar at all. What does feature, the only thing that features is whether this person is Hindu, in which case he'll go to India, or if it's Muslim, he'll go to Pakistan. So the two spaces with the matter only are India and Pakistan. And it's almost like an emptying out of a space. Toba Tek Singh has been dissipated, has been made to disappear, has been made to vanish from the face of India or Pakistan. So you know, now they're trying to persuade him and telling him that it's actually in India, you're going the right direction, and if it's not in India, it will be in India at some point in time. So the obvious thing happening over here is they're trying to cajole him into just going over to India, after which their job will be finished, their duty will be finished. So again, look at the way in which a human being is mapped purely on the basis of its religious affiliation. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the spatial affiliation. It's got nothing to do with his cultural affiliation, but he just happens to be a Hindu or a Sikh, so he has to go to India, even if he wants it or doesn't want it. It's got no effect whatsoever. Okay, all this persuasion had no effect. They even tried to drag him on the other side, to the other side, but it was no use. So again, they're trying to control him corporeally, they're trying to coerce him corporeally, they're trying to drag him, his body down to the other side, but that too is useless. Why? There he stood with his swollen legs, as if no power on earth could dislodge him. So again, the swollen legs become important. That is almost as a close-up to the swollen legs. We are told that he had not slept or sat down. No one has ever seen him non-standing for 15 years, as a result of which his feet has swollen. His feet have swollen. It's almost like, as I mentioned, an accumulation of time which has gone into his body. So it's almost like a corporealization of time, or a temporalization of the body, whichever way you want to look at it. So all the time has got into his body and is sort of giving him some kind of a density which is producing stillness, which is producing immobility, and he's just transfixed there. It doesn't move at all. So every effort to move him, it doesn't work, because he just stands there like Atlas, the statue, because his feet have swollen over the years. No power of earth could dislodge him. Soon, since he was a harmless old man, the officials left him alone for the time being and proceeded to the rest of the exchange. So because he was a harmless old man, the officials left him alone and he just stood there forever while the rest of the exchange took place. Again, exchange over here being a very bureaucratic maneuver, a mindless maneuver where just boxes are taken, people are sent and pushed across the borders as per decisions taken by two big centers. Okay, so the proceeding goes on, the swapping goes on forever. Just before sunrise, Bishan Singh let out a horrible scream. As everybody rushed towards him, the man who had stood erect on his legs for 15 years now pitched face forward on the ground. On the one side, behind barbed wire, stood together the lunatics of India, and on the other side, behind more barbed wire, stood the lunatics of Pakistan. In between, on a bit of earth which had no name, lay Toba Tek Singh. So obviously it's a very compelling conclusion. It's very moving emotionally as well as politically. We find that the barbed wires become important, because the barbed wires here become the borders that force you from moving towards where you want to move. The barbed wires here become the symbol of human agency-lessness, of human imprisonment, or the imprisonment of the agentic human self. They're imprisoned within the barbed wires. So the barbed wires in India, there are more barbed wires in Pakistan. Now what happens at the end is that there's a space in between India and Pakistan, a non-classified space, and that is where Bishan Singh lies. That's where Bishan Singh morphs. So he, in a way, he becomes that space. So Bishan Singh becomes Toba Tek Singh. So Toba Tek Singh is a no man's land between two territories. So the final claim that Bishan Singh manages to do is that he manages to claim the third piece of land, the third piece of territory. So these two big acts of territorialization, India and Pakistan, he rejects both, and in the end, very symbolically, very spectacularly, he claims the third territory between India and Pakistan, which had no name, the declassified territory. Just like Toba Tek Singh had been declassified, there had been no classification of Toba Tek Singh in terms of where it was situated. No one knew a neat answer to it. In a similar way, the strip of land between India and Pakistan, it had no name, and that name becomes Toba. So this claiming of the third territory becomes important, because it's a rejection of the two territories given to him without his agency, without his will. The big territory of India and another big territory of Pakistan. Obviously, he never wanted to go to either of the two territories. So in some sense, the conclusion of the story is a rejection of the two binaristic understanding of territory, and it's a claiming of a third piece of land, which becomes Toba Tek Singh. So the final scene on Toba Tek Singh, the short story, is an act of claiming, is an act of agency, an agentic claim. And like I mentioned before, the only agency available over here is an agency of true madness, because the only reason why he wasn't shot when he did not want to go to Pakistan or to India is that because he was a madman. So his madness, in a way, becomes a license to which he can claim the third territory, the license with which he's let go temporarily, because people are thinking, oh, this is a harmless madman, so let us deal with the other bureaucratic maneuvers first, and we can deal with him later. So in a paradoxical sense, that act of madness, that identity of madness, that marker of madness, saves them and enables them to claim the third territory, which is Toba Tek Singh. So as you can see, this whole story is very moving, very compelling, and it's one of the most complex and perhaps the most famous shorts written on partition. But then it just blurs the borderlines between madness and rationality, but insane and insane. And obviously, it really raises some very important questions on human agency in a politically predetermined regime, where things are politically predetermined, where decisions are taken for you. Where does it leave you as an agentic human self? So like you mentioned, the only way you can attain agency, the only way you can acquire some agency is through madness. Right? So madness becomes the only route to agency. And the fact that he just lies in between two territories is also, like I mentioned, an act of claiming. He claims a third piece of land, he claims a strip of land, which becomes Toba Tek Singh. So in a way, Toba Tek Singh, which had disappeared from the map from between India and Pakistan, it reappears. So the final act of, you can almost call it suicide, the fact that he decides to stay there till he dies, he decides to stand there till he dies. And the final collapse that he has in that strip of land, that becomes, in a way, naming the land as well. So the claiming of the land and the naming of the land happen together. So the land becomes Toba Tek Singh. And as Montu says, in between, on a bit of earth which had no name, lay Toba Tek Singh. So the namelessness of Toba Tek Singh rings out as well. But at the same time, he becomes a space of land. He becomes a space that was presumed to have been lost, the declassified space. Right? So the disappearance of Toba Tek Singh and the death of Bishan Singh are simultaneous acts in some sense. And also the disappearance of Toba Tek Singh is undercut by the deliberate suicide of Bishan Singh, the fact that he chooses to stay there till he dies. In a way, to a certain extent, helps him reclaim that identity in his refusal to go to either of the two identities conferred on him. So we have a rejection of territorial identity, or territorialized identities which are already conferred on him without his consent, that is rejected. And on the other hand, we have a claim to some kind of a different identity, a third identity which is not available to him. So he makes the unavailable available. So that no man's land where no laws work. It's a very symbolic space if you think about it. It's a symbolic strip of lawlessness. There's no legal law operative in that setting. It's neither India nor Pakistan. It's a liminal landscape. And the liminality of the landscape becomes important, because that's exactly what makes this particular move, this particular suicide, this particular collapse, so political in quality. Right? So, this is the entire story of Toba Tek Singh. It's about agency-lessness, it's about madness, it's about what appears to be rational, to be the most mindless activity. And in a way, it's also about epistemic violence. And that's something I keep telling, because it's easier to decode, it's easier to spot the physical violence done. But also look at the way the hesitations in narratives become important, the ambivalences in narratives become important. When Fazal then comes, for instance, and narrates to Bishan saying the well-being of his family, when it comes to his daughter, he hesitates. So that little brief interruption in the narrative becomes a pointer, a very poignant pointer towards an epistemic crisis, towards a crisis level of knowledge, that you don't know what happens to the daughter. We as readers don't know. Perhaps Fazaldin doesn't know. No one quite knows what happens to the daughter, so we have to sort of dress it up with a lie to a little extent. And then, of course, again, when Bishan Singh asks Fazaldin, where is Toba Tek Singh? Again, the hesitation that we say, it's in India, oh no, it's in Pakistan. So that too doesn't quite work, because that too is a narrative interruption to a certain extent, right? And so these interruptions, this metalepsis, all these become very important in different degrees in this particular short story, because what that does, this network of interruptions, is that it tells you, it is reflective of the fractured reality of life, the fractured understanding of reality to a large extent. That is what is caused by partition. So among other things, the partition of India and Pakistan, it fractured the lives of many people, it fractured the bodies of many people, it mutilated the bodies of many people, but also it fractured the identities of many people, the level of knowledge, that your knowledge of reality became fractured and stayed fractured forever. Right? So as we can see, it's a profoundly political story. It's a deeply emotional story, And it's a story which pitches or pits madness against totalitarianism. So madness becomes the only resistance to totalitarianism in the story. And by totalitarian, I mean the bureaucratic maneuvers through which decisions are made for people without any consent on them whatsoever, without any agency or any question of agency that is acquired from them at any level. So as you can see, this is a story which is very resonant to the political climates even today, and it's something which will always be resonant in any political climate, because when it comes to taking consent, when it comes to taking a decision about people, the collective consent of people, the individual consent of people, the micro consent is never important. What gets important is the macro consent. Just like the micro space is never important. No one knows what Toba Tek Singh is. No one needs to know what Toba Tek Singh is. What is more important is the macro space, the macro territories of India and Pakistan, the two big land masses, the two grand narratives, the two national narratives. So the two big novels erupting out of this crisis, out of this abyss. And in the abyss in between, little things, little casualties like Toba Tek Singh become collateral damage. This ambition becomes a little collateral damage in that abyss between India and Pakistan. So without I finish this short story, I hope you find this compelling and moving. It is a very, very rich piece of literature. It's one of the finest pieces of short story, short fiction in 20th century, which is why it deserves a very rich location in a course like this. So with that, we've finished Toba Tek Singh by Sardar Hasan Manto, and I move on to the final text in this course, which will be the chess plays by Munshi Premchand or Shatranj Khilari, with which we'll begin the next lecture. Thank you for your attention.